All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And as we are inching closer to the start of a new NFL season, I want to take this time out to talk all things NFC South. Now, of course, the NFC South, surprisingly and not surprisingly, but nonetheless, the last time that the NFC South had multiple participants in the playoffs, you have to go back to 2020. Okay, and of course that year both the Saints and Bucks got in, but since then the NFC South has been a one bid league, and of course, in most cases the division winner has hovered around 500. So, for the most part, it's kind of like, just the best of the worst almost, if you want to put it like that. But nonetheless, somebody still gets to win this division. Somebody still gets to move on to the playoffs. And of course, as far as moving on to the playoffs, recently it's been all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Why? Because since 2021, the Bucks have been the only team that has won the NFC South. And last year, for an example, the Bucks were the only team to finish with a record of 500 or more. And of course, with the uneven amount of regular season games, either you have a losing record or you have a winning record. No more 500, but nonetheless, the Bucks were the only team to finish with a winning record a year ago. And of course, Tampa is going to look to make it 5 consecutive division titles, but is anybody going to dethrone them? Now, of course, the Bucks, like I said, they're trying to make it 5 straight years in a row with the division title. They've made the postseason each of the last 5 years, and that came on the heels of missing the playoffs for 12 consecutive years. Okay, first things first for the Bucks. You look at the quarterback in Baker Mayfield, and after bouncing around the NFL with several teams, Baker looks like he has finally found a home with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year, for an example, Mayfield joined Tom Brady as the only quarterbacks in Bucs franchise history to throw at least 40 touchdowns in a season. With that said, you got to take the good and the bad with Baker Mayfield because he threw 41 touchdown passes last year. He also threw 16 interceptions. Luckily for Mayfield, because he has that gunslinger in him, the Bucks have a defense that is good enough to bail them out of those situations. Okay, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But nonetheless, getting back to this offense, it also helps Mayfield's cause that he can continue to get the football to a guy like Mike Evans at wide receiver. 11 years in the National Football League and 11 years with at least 1,000 yards receiving for the future Hall of Famer. Also, Tampa is hopeful to get a healthy Chris Godwin back this year at wide receiver. Of course, Godwin's season was cut short due to a hamstring injury. And of course, having Evans and Godwin together makes them a tough duo for defensive backs around the NFL to stop. Also, tight end Cade Otton. I think he's going to make some people happy who take him in fantasy football. Might not be an early pick, but nonetheless, he's a guy who knows how to move the chains. And then you look at this Bucks backfield with Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. A lot of balance right there. And of course, it enables Tampa to consistently have a fresh back on the field. You look at left tackle Tristan Wirfs, who has quickly morphed and emerged into being an anchor on this offensive line for Tampa Bay. And then, of course, this cover two, this Tampa two, whatever you want to refer to it as, now under the guidance of head coach Todd Bowles. And, when you think about the cover two, the strength is basically up the middle, and it starts with the big fella. I'm talking about Vita Vea at nose tackle. You look at the linebacker play of a guy like Levante David. He's all over the field. And then, of course, I feel like on a national stage, Antoine Winfield Jr. at safety, I feel doesn't get the pub that he deserves. I mean, this guy can cover some ground. One of the smartest safeties, in my opinion, in football, and I think he's going to have another Pro Bowl season. And then picking up a guy like the edge rusher and Hassan Reddick, the former Philadelphia Eagle. I think he fits in to this Bucks scheme like a glove, and I think this Bucks team is going to once again be in the mix to win this division. Now, with that said, Tampa, they finished in first place last year. They're going to play basically all of the first place teams on their schedule, and I say that from last year, but you look at it. They got to go to Houston in week number 2. They won the AFC South last year. They host Philly in week number 4. They're the defending Super Bowl champions. They won the NFC East. They're at Buffalo in week number 11. Of course, Buffalo won the AFC East. And then they're at the Rams in week number 12. And, of course, the Rams won the NFC West. Aside from those games, 2 games that you have to keep an eye on for the Bucks, week 1 and week 15. And of course, week 1 this Sunday, they're at Atlanta. Week 15, they get the Falcons at home. And the Bucks were swept by the Falcons last year, but they still managed to win the NFC South. Let's see how things break down this year. And speaking of those Falcons, you have to wonder if this is finally going to be the year where things come together for them. Because like I said, it's only been one team getting to the playoffs from the NFC South in recent years. And in most cases, it's come down to that last week of the season, with a win or go home game. And of course, the Falcons have not been able to get over that hump. Last year, we saw Atlanta get off to a strong start. And in that start, they swept the season series from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they had a bad second half swoon. They only won 2 games over the second half of the season. And in the process, Tampa Bay was able to pass them and, of course, once again win the division. And, of course, that just left Atlanta to ask themselves what could have been. Now, the Falcons, they're finally going to do now what they should have done much earlier last year, and that's give the keys to the franchise to quarterback Michael Penix Jr. I said this from the jump. It was a weird situation last year because the Falcons last offseason backed up the truck to pay quarterback Kirk Cousins in free agency, okay? And then they turned around a couple of weeks later and used the first-round pick on quarterback Michael Penix Jr., but now it's finally Penix's time. Now, Penix did start 3 games, the last 3 games of the season last year for the Falcons. Atlanta went 1-2 in those games. He threw 3 touchdowns. He threw 3 picks. But now, whomever's going to be the quarterback for the Falcons, they need more consistency out of that position. 21 touchdowns and 19 interceptions last year. That ain't going to get it done this time around. Now, I'll tell you like this, what Penix brings to the table, I think he has a much liver arm than the veteran Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, he still has the knowledge of the position, but at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins is going to be an up and down quarterback. And of course, it was too many of the downs last season coming down the stretch, which led to him being benched. Now, aside from Michael Penix at quarterback, you look at the 1-2 combo that Atlanta has in their backfield with running backs Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Now, the one thing about Robinson, he has 2 years under his belt in the NFL. Already more than 500 carries. He had more than 300 carries last year. So you just wonder how fresh that he's going to be going into the season. A lot of talent at the wide receiver position for Atlanta with Drake London and Darnell Mooney. And then, of course, there is tight end Michael Pitts. Veteran Jake Matthews on this offensive line, as protecting a guy like Michael Penix is going to be very important. However, I look at this Atlanta defense, and I feel like the same issues going into last season could potentially plague Atlanta this year. And it's the fact, and it's been the last couple of years. The Falcons have simply lacked a pass rush. They only had 31 sacks last season. And honestly, I said it then at the 2024 draft as Atlanta screwed that up. Why? Because you had a guy like Dallas Turner sitting right there, and you took Penix. Now, if you wanted Penix, you should have used the money that you spent on Kirk Cousins to upgrade your pass rush. And Atlanta has still not fixed that issue. You got a guy like Jesse Bates playing safety, and Jesse Bates is a very talented safety. But nonetheless, it's a situation where if you cannot put pressure consistently on the opposing quarterback, you are going to have an issue. Even with that said, Raheem Morris still has a solid team that I think is going to be in the mix to potentially win the NFC South. And like I said, you got to bookmark those games on the schedule because those two games with Tampa are going to be huge. Now, you look at the Carolina Panthers, and after years of dysfunction, you got to wonder if they're finally going to be able to develop some semblance of order. Panthers have not had a winning season since 2017, while over their last 6 years, their record is just 29 and 71. And to give you an idea of that, Kansas City by themselves won 15 games in the regular season last year. So that's half of what the Panthers have done over the last 6 years. Last year, Dave Canales, who was in his first year as a head coach of Carolina, he was brought in to try to fix things. But more importantly, he was brought in to try to fix quarterback Bryce Young. And of course, Young was the first overall pick of the 2023 NFL draft, struggled a lot as a rookie, played on a bad team, and it led to him ultimately being benched at one point last season in favor of veteran Andy Dalton. But now, when he came back to the lineup, he started to show signs of improvement, and the Panthers are hopeful that he could build off of that. Granted that Young played in 4 fewer games last year, we still saw his sack number decrease, okay, and that's a big start right there. There's talent around Young on this Young squad. Chuba Hubbard, he needs to build off of that 1,000-yard rushing season he had last year. Carolina used their first round pick on University of Arizona wide receiver Tedaro McMillan. And of course, he's expected to come in and have a big impact for this offense. This Panthers defense definitely needs to improve. Carolina was last in the NFL last year in defense, and in doing so, they were the only unit in the league to give up more than 30 points or average giving up more than 30 points per game and more than 400 yards per contest. I'm looking at this Sunday, week 1 at Jacksonville. I want to see right out of the chute how much improvement that we see from this Bucs squad. I think that could Panthers squad, that could potentially be the foundation for this season. And then finally, there's the New Orleans Saints. And of course, the Saints, they've had 4 consecutive years without a trip to the postseason. You just have to wonder if things are going to get better. You got first-year head coach Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles last year as they won the Super Bowl. Now, the Saints, they're going with Spencer Rattler at quarterback this year. And New Orleans quarterbacks as a whole only threw 21 touchdowns last year, which was 20th in the NFL. Well, running back Alvin Kamara continued to be Alvin Kamara. And, of course, he's a jack of all trades for the Saints offense. Just give him the football and get out of his way. New Orleans needs to have a healthy Chris Olave this year at wide receiver. And then you look at the veterans on this defense that are going to, once again, I think, have an impact. A guy like Cam Jordan on that defensive line, he continues to get it done. And as far as I'm concerned, he's a future Hall of Famer. And then you got veteran linebacker Demario Davis. And, of course, the biggest question is, will the Saints be as bad as people expect them to be? I think they're going to be feisty. I'm not here to say that they're going to win a lot of games, but nonetheless, I think Kellen Moore is looking to establish his program in New Orleans, but nonetheless, it is going to be a work in progress. With that said, I think this division comes down to Atlanta and Tampa Bay once again. And honestly, I just feel like the Bucs are the class of this division. I truly do think the thing that will hinder Atlanta this year, once again, is their lack of a pass rush. For the Bucs, they're the most balanced team in this division. They have the toughest schedule, but the bottom line is Tampa needs to go out there and win the games that they're expected to win. Like I said, they have a slew of division champs from last year on their schedule. It's going to be tough, but nonetheless, these Bucs have continued to show resiliency, and when it's all said and done, I think they win the NFC South once again here in 2025. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up, and as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. And as we continue to navigate to the start of a new NFL season, be sure to check out this channel tomorrow as I'll be talking about the AFC South, the last but certainly not least division in my division by division breakdowns for the upcoming NFL season. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports. And if you give me that follow, I will give you that follow in return. And the same could be said for Instagram, where you could check us out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. And just before I sign off on this one, a special shout out to a special lady. Any of you guys out there who are dads, you know what I'm talking about. When you have daughters, they kind of hit you with stuff. So my youngest asked me to take Bluey with this podcast, and this is a dedication to her, and just to want to let her know that I love her and I care about her so much. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And before I sign off, Pajangas, what's going on, my man? Very happy to hear from you on this night. And listen, we've got a lot of football on the slate coming up this Sunday, so I definitely can't wait to chop it up with you next weekend as well. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.